In my bio, it says that I'm professor of econometrics, but that's totally wrong. I'm a professor of economics of social insurance, you could say. And that's only a one-day-a-week position. And my main task is being partner in a consultancy firm, which I started with a colleague, and that is called APE. Doesn't refer to an animal, but is an acronym. Where PE stands for public economics. So we are economists, and what I would like to walk you through are, contrary to the previous presentation by Ring Prins, is not very verbal. It's a set of graphs and schemes. Also, to show you how complicated the Dutch disability system is as it evolved when the new scheme was introduced, which was very successful also through preceding measures that were taken as of 2002. And you could call that a Dutch miracle, but I use a question mark, and I will explain to you why the question mark is there. Well, this is the short history of Dutch disability benefits and benefit expenditures. The upper line trajectory is the people on disability as a percentage of the labor force. Around the 1990s, we were a world champion. The OECD has documented world champion of disability benefits. After that, we were first taken over by Eastern European countries and by Scandinavian countries, I have to say, especially Sweden and Norway. But then a number of measures were taken, and I don't want to dwell on those because I want to really focus on the last years since 2002 that brought down the number of people on disability benefit. But if you let a program like disability benefits go out of hand, then you're stuck with a number of people on disability benefits that will be very difficult to reduce, and that is also what this graph tells you. Now, the benefit expenditures dropped as of 1985 stronger than the number of people on benefits, because it's always easy to cut benefits or to change programs such that people have more difficulty to get a benefit or to get a full benefit. So that is what gradually happened, and that was more successful in financial terms. It was more successful than in terms of the people on benefits. So the program evolved, you could say, in broad terms, and also the OECD uses those concepts, from income protection to activation. And activation, well, this is the entry rate, is the people going on disability as a percentage of the labor force, again, and then for men and women, the men are the blue line and the women are the red line. And what you here see is that, especially during the 90s, the women had a much more higher probability of going on disability than the men, but the miracle happened after. What you can see here, after 2002, it dropped, and the difference between the disability risks for men and women decreased significantly. But what is more important, the general disability entry rate is now at a level of 0.5% each year of the labor force, which is a good OECD average. So from 2%, when it was at its highest level, it went down to 0.5%. Well, this is what you could call a miracle. Other countries, like the US, which now have a disability benefit problem, maybe you know about it, maybe not, use now the Dutch way of doing, the Dutch policies, the Dutch way of using incentives, especially for employers, for firms, as a model to be used in the US, to show you how how the difference between the US and Netherlands, which was extremely big around 1980, gradually converged, and we are now doing better, so to say, than the United States. And that makes the Dutch disability policy an export product. Maybe that's also why I was invited here. I'm not sure whether, because you also did drastic steps to cut down on your disability beneficiaries. How do you decompose? What were the main factors that caused this enormous drop? I mean, if you see a drop of 70% lower entries into disability benefits, what were the main factors? The main factors are, generally speaking, apart from what is here on the slide, is incentives for firms. You have to imagine that the first 2 years you are on sickness benefits. You can only claim a disability benefit after being 2 years on sickness benefits. Those sickness benefits are paid for by your employer. So an employer has a strong interest in keeping absence rates, staying on on sickness benefits low. And it also helps preventing people claiming disability benefits. So what is promoted by this strong financial obligation, which is extreme, which happens nowhere in the world. I mean, putting firms on a financial obligation to pay sickness benefits for a maximum of 2 years doesn't exist anywhere else. Why did the Dutch employers accept that? That's another story. I don't know exactly, but that's something maybe we can discuss later. But anyway, it worked enormously. It worked, and that is a main message, because it capitalizes on incentives for employers, and then they have to get professional. Of course, they have to contract private insurance if they're small to cover those benefit liabilities, but also to contract healthcare, to get people back to work, and all kinds of services. And that's also laid down in law, which sort of services firms have to contract. But that whole system worked extremely well, and this is called the gatekeeper protocol. The gatekeeper protocol. And then, of course, in 2006, and that started in 2002. So that was a major factor that helped bringing down disability entries. But then another thing was, just as you see everywhere, as you did here for people under 40, if I'm not misinformed, making eligibility standards more strict. And that was about half of the explanation of that enormous drop of 70% going down in entries. Now, how looks this new disability system that was introduced in 2006? Quite complicated. Not many people who are confronted with it, both firms, but also employees, and sometimes I think even the people who have to administer it fully understand how it works. But anyway, nevertheless will try to explain it. The definition of disability in the Dutch context is loss of earning capacity. So it's measured in euros. What you earned first and what you can earn now, that difference is the loss. The loss, you're only allowed to a disability benefit if that loss is more than 35% of your earning capacity. It used to be 15%, so one of the measures to make the system stricter is raising it up to 35%. About 45% of the claimants at the end of the 2-year sickness period are turned down, are denied benefits so it's an almost 50-50 gamble is of course stupid to say, but that is about the percentage that is not awarded a disability benefit. It's turned down. 45%. So the other 55% are divided between partial benefit, so you lose part of your earning capacity, but you still can work. And there are strong incentives in the system, in this new system, to use as much as you can of that earning capacity. And but if you can't find work because you're partially disabled, you're only awarded a benefit based on the social minimum. So that is a strong incentive to, but of course, not everybody is capable of, after 2 years of sickness and then losing part of your earning capacity to find work. So then by the system, you're penalized. You get a penalty because a lower benefit. 26% is awarded such a partial benefit. These are data of entries of 2012, and about half of them are working, and the others are not working, and so they have a much lower benefit. Then the other are considered fully disabled. They lost at least 80% of their earning capacity, and that is a new element in the disability scheme of 2006. You make a difference according to permanency of the disablement. If you're considered permanently disabled, if you don't have prospects to re-enter the labor market, then you get this is the no recovery group, and it's about 29% of those awarded benefits. You get a benefit which is called an IVA. It doesn't matter what the name is, but the biggest group, 71% of the 74%, which is more than half of all entries, are in the group of being assessed as fully disabled, but with prospects of getting back part of your earning capacity by some form of treatment. I mean, these assessments are made by social insurance doctors, but they can guide people to such a treatment, because that is in the curative sector. So that is one of the problems. I mean, you can say, well, we see prospects for treatments, especially for people with mental disabilities. This is the case. Often they end up in that temporary, fully disabled category, which is not for nothing, is the biggest group, and only 11% of those are working, although they're considered fully disabled. But I mean, there's still a margin of being able to work. If you look at the entry rates and how they evolved, in the explanatory note for the new disability scheme, the prediction was that only 14% would end up in that temporary full disability category, and 43% would be fully disabled without any prospect for recovery, and 43% would be partially disabled. Now, the reality was totally different. Most of the groups and most of the awards were given, the benefits were given in that full and temporary group. And that is also the group where you see the problems, social problems, also partly people that have multiple problems, as Rink was discussing. You find those in that middle group. And especially, I mean, a system that is based on capitalizing on incentives for employers, where you have both the financial obligation to pay sickness benefits for a maximum of 2 years, and then you get a premium differentiation. You get a higher premium as a firm on a premium differentiation on the level of individual firms. So if one of your employees goes on disability, you're hit with a higher premium rate. All those incentives work when you have an employer. But there are large groups, temporary agency workers, for instance, of people on a temporary contract that ends while you're sick, who don't have an employer anymore. They're all entitled to sickness benefits and also to disability benefits, but they don't get, their employer, which is absent, is not exposed to the incentives, and therefore they don't get the help that firms are forced or willing to organize. So there's a problem, and that is the problem among what is called safety net. So safety net, because apart from this system which totally relies on the financial capacity, you could say, of firms, there is a collective fund, a safety net, for those who lose their employment during sickness or who don't have an employer when sickness starts. For instance, people who are on unemployment benefits. Now, what you see is that if you look at labor force statistics, then about 25% would belong to if they would report sick, would be in the safety net, 25% of the labor force. But there are more than half of the entries into the disability scheme. And there you see the problem with so strongly capitalizing on incentives for employers. If you don't have an employer, then the system doesn't work. Activating power stops, you could say. It's activating power stops. And early intervention and all the good things that comes from those that still are in employment doesn't work for those. And that's why 25% of the labor force represents half of the entries into the disability system. And that is my question mark with the miracle. This is a longitudinal study that we did. Yeah, sorry for the Dutch in the legenda. But these are based on a longitudinal study. We followed cohorts together with Astrid, the firm where Rink and Theo work for. We did a longitudinal study both in 2007 and in 2012. Now, of course, the cyclical conditions in 2007 were much more beneficial than the whole labor market condition was before the crisis. And 2012, I assume Denmark has also suffered from this crisis, financial, euro. Well, you're not a euro country, but anyway. The Dutch suffered from that, maybe more than Denmark, at least. And in terms of labor market, for instance, unemployment rate grew from 4% in 2007 to 8% in 2012. So reintegration possibilities of people who are long-term sick or are on disability, especially those who are long-term sick, are difficult. I was afraid of that. Now, what you see here is the work resumption rates across the 2-year, these are days, across the 2-year sickness benefit. And what you see, the dotted lines are 2007, and the straight lines are 2012, and the upper lines are people who, at a certain moment, say, my health is good, has become good again, and the others stay on a bad health, but still have possibilities to resume their work, of course, at a much lower rate. So here's a difference between goed, you can read that, that's good, and slecht, that's bad. So, en gezondheid is gezondheid, is health. And ervaren means perceived. Okay, now you know everything. You learn Dutch. So what you see is for the people in bad health, it didn't make much difference whether the economic conditions were good or bad. But especially for the people in good health, it made a big difference. And this is for regular employees, and regular employees are those who have a fixed permanent contract and are fully helped by their employer. Now we go to the safety netters, and here those are the work resumption rates for safety netters. And especially if you look at the difference for those in good health, between 2007, the dotted blue line, and the 2012 line, you see the enormous impact of the economic crisis on those that are the most vulnerable, the flex workers, those on unemployment when they call sick. So this is all the question mark of the Dutch system, but of course it's a general theme on this conference. How do you help those that are more vulnerable than average? So I come to the conclusion. The success is, which I already emphasized, is putting incentives on employers, and it leads to early intervention. And the system, of course, doesn't discriminate according to mental or physical health. I mean, everybody is treated not in an equal way at an individual level, but by this legal system, by this scheme. There's no difference according to age or to cause of disability. So early intervention is the general recommendation and an important part of the success, so that you, before preventing that people have to claim disability benefits. Now, its success lies in stronger, but I've dwelt on that substantially. The strict administration, the administration of disability, part of the problem of the explosion of disability benefits in the 80s in Holland was because the administration was very lenient. There were no incentives for the administrators, for those who had to assess disability claims, to be very strict. It is still public administration, it's still a public monopoly, but still what you see is that they're quite strict, and that, I mean, you can lay down in law strict eligibility standards, but they have no value if they're not administered in the way they're written down in law. Now, what a big change, and which also helped to reduce the number, is that the administrators in an equitable way still try to be as strict as the lawmaker, the legislator intended. Denial rate is about 45, and it also makes that there is a process of self-selection among employees, among workers, that says, well, my chance of getting a disability benefit is not very high, so I have to find another solution. So that then the incentives go together for the employer and for the employee, if you have an employer. And yeah. But nonetheless, and that is a general observation, disability benefits always work as a social valve. You saw that in the Eastern European countries, where suddenly unemployment, before on the communist ages, unemployment was defined away, and suddenly there was unemployment, and in countries like Hungary and Poland, you saw an enormous rise in disability benefits because they were the better option. So they work as a social valve. We saw it in Holland. You saw the difference between disability rates in the 90s between women and men. That was because there was an explosion. Holland was, in comparison to countries like yours, like Scandinavian countries, Holland was terribly backward in terms of female labor participation. And there was a boost, or suddenly a boost, new generation, and also economic conditions made mothers go to the labor market. But there were no provisions. So they often ended up in disability benefits. So there is, you also see the social valve quality, the social valve, well, anyway, quality of disability, of a disability benefit system. And you see it here with the safety nets. And I want to end with that. Thank you.